Hi, my name is Dr. Felucia. I'm a licensed psychologist, and today I'm going to be talking to you about religious OCD, otherwise known as religious scrupulosity OCD. And this is going to be just a brief overview of it. And so I'm going to start off by talking about what the symptoms are. Okay, so religious OCD or religious scrupulosity OCD is a subtype of OCD, and it's characterized by unwanted or intrusive thoughts, urges, and images. Okay, and this is similar to the general definition of OCD, but with religious scrupulosity OCD, these unwanted urges, thoughts, and images have a religious theme around them. Okay, and so that's what religious OCD is. That's the first part, the obsessions. With the compulsions are driven by the need to neutralize or reduce the anxiety, shame, disgust that comes along with these unwanted or intrusive religious urges, thoughts, and images. And so this is where the compulsions come in. And the compulsions are also along the themes of religion. So it could include a lot of praying. It can include reading through the religious text for reassurance, washing, counting, lining things up. These are some of the external things that can happen with religious OCD or the external compulsions, but it can also be internal. So that could be praying to oneself or praying, not praying to oneself, but praying silently so that no one can hear. It could be trying to think of a counter thought, counter image that will replace the bad one. And this takes up several, it takes up several hours per day. It's not the kind of thing that is just fleeting. It takes up a lot of time. It causes significant distress, just like the general definition of OCD. When we think about religious OCD, people who have this religious scrupulosity OCD have deep-seated fear and anxiety that they either don't have enough faith, they're going to hell, that they have somehow had a religious failing with very serious consequences. And so along with that come these challenging, intrusive thoughts, obsessions, urges, images, okay? And so some examples are this: they could be afraid that they're going to hell. They could be afraid that they've either knowingly or unknowingly committed some sort of sin or blasphemy that is somehow beyond redemption, that either they'll not get forgiven for, or maybe they forgot to confess it, or they did the sin without even knowing. Okay, sometimes, and another symptom of this is that people who have this, they can feel afraid that they're going to lose control, but losing control in some way that would violate the religious principles. So they could be concerned that by going to a church or religious setting, that they would just start shouting out blasphemies or profanities. Or they're also concerned that they would just lose control in some sort of way. Maybe they won't take communion correctly, or maybe they said their confession wrong. And as a result of this, the stimuli that trigger these obsessions, these unwanted urges, thoughts, and images can be avoided, right? So sometimes people, when they are dealing with this, they'll avoid certain religious texts, or they'll avoid hearing certain songs, or they'll avoid engaging in certain types of religious activities, such as, a certain type of worship or taking communion, things like that. Sometimes we see the opposite, in which people are going to church or the religious setting excessively, okay? And so that is going along the lines of being afraid that they have perhaps missed something, or thinking that by doing this will earn them enough, they'll earn them enough, I would say, credit to erase that doubt and uncertainty. Reassurance, just like with OCD in general, reassurance is a huge part of religious scrupulosity OCD. And so in a situation like this, someone will often ask others around them, did you see me do this? Do you think that I'm going to, go to hell for doing this? Do you think I might have accidentally blasphemed? Sometimes it can be very specific, but other times the reassurance can just be very general, asking if they think they're a good person, asking them, do you remember me doing something wrong, asking about, when they were saved, certain things like that. And so, when you're a religious person, it's not uncommon to want to talk to members of your religious community about your faith experience. But when it's done compulsively, when it's done over and over again to try and reduce fear, anxiety, and uncertainty, that's when it becomes, that's when that reassurance becomes maladaptive, okay? And so, also with that can come a lot of confession. And so someone may think, well, I confessed this to somebody, I confessed this to, the priest, but I probably need to do it again because I probably didn't do it the right way. I forgot this other thing. So there's a lot of confession. The confession can be excessive, but the confession also can be inappropriate, right? So when I say inappropriate, meaning that things that, we don't need to confess. For instance, oh, I had this dream, and in this dream I hit somebody and I think that I committed a sin, or confessing fleeting, inappropriate thoughts, feeling the need to basically confess everything. And the challenge with reassurance is that reassurance will never be enough. And I talk about this in some of my other videos with OCD, but when you ask for reassurance and when people give you reassurance, what that does is it gives you a false sense of safety. Temporarily, you might feel a little bit better, but the amount of reassurance that you get will never be enough, right? Someone could reassure you one way and you think, well, maybe they didn't mean it, or maybe they didn't know that I did this thing in my past. And so reassurance, although feels good for people who have OCD and just for people in general, it's never going to be enough to address the deep-seated fears and anxiety. And that's when and another way that people also try to get reassurance too is just by going through religious texts, trying to see, well, if I did this, am I going to go to hell? Does this show that I have enough faith? Looking through with that lens of anxiety, trying to get a specific answer. And this can go on obsessively. Okay, so on to treatment. When we think about treatment for religious scrupulosity, OCD, it is the same treatment for OCD in general, and that is ERP, exposure and response prevention therapy. And I also have videos about this on the channel, so I've encouraged you to check that out to get a more in-depth idea of how ERP works. But ERP for scrupulosity would involve exposure to situations and other stimuli that trigger those unwanted thoughts and urges and images that are religious themed, right? And so it could be listening to a particular song that you avoid. It could be looking at a communion wafer and then maybe touching the communion wafer and then maybe taking it within a certain time where you're not praying for hours obsessively. Okay, it could be sitting in a church, for instance, or sitting in a religious setting and just sitting there. Sometimes for people who have this, being in settings like this is really challenging because there are triggers everywhere. Okay, and another thing I want to mention too is that, our as people who, as practitioners who deliver ERP, ethically, we are going to do what works for you and doesn't make you feel like you are violating your religion in any way. Okay, so it's always important that when you're getting treatment for this, speak up if you feel like you're being told to do something that would violate your religious principles. ERP is always going to stay consistent with what you believe to be true religiously. It's not going to force you to violate anything or make you do something that you feel is against your religious principles and conscience. That being said, however, you are going to feel discomfort initially. You may have not been in a religious setting in a long time. And when you go there, you might want to just run out the door and not stay at all. So when you go through the treatment for this, expect to feel levels of discomfort. It's not going to be easy. It's not going to be fun. But when I work with people, when we do this work, when they come out of this on the other side, they'll say things, and I really believe this will be true for you too, is that the religious rituals and practices have a meaning now to them. Before, people with religious scrupulosity, OCD, would sometimes engage in prayer in a ritualistic way, right? It didn't have meaning. It would be to maybe like ward off something bad happening, but it wasn't done with intention. The person wasn't present at the time. And so after people have gone through this treatment, they'll say, you know what? The things that I used to avoid, I'm doing them now, but they're more meaningful. When I pray, this is how I pray. It's meaningful. It's communion. When I do it's an enjoyable part of my religion now. It's more meaningful. It's not just something done ritualistically to avoid anxiety. And so that's some encouragement for people who are going through this, that it does get better. You have to really stick with the exercises because they're tough at first and it doesn't feel good, but you will change your fundamental relationship with uncertainty, and also see some parts of your religion perhaps in a different and more meaningful way. Somebody who I got this quote from another practitioner who works with OCD. His name is Dr. Marty Franklin. He said that when people deal with religious OCD or scrupulosity OCD, to think about it as OCD wearing the cloak of religion to get into your life. And OCD is just masking itself under the positive guise of religion, but that is not what religion or your religion is not what the OCD is telling you to do. Right. And in general, OCD tends to target what people love the most. And so for people who really treasure and value their religion, it can be really tough because the OCD is coming in with this religious mask saying, obey my rules, follow me, do whatever I tell you to do. And it's just this big, awful bully, but it doesn't have to be that way. Okay, so I hope this information helps you. If you'd like to learn more about this, please put a comment in the description box, or not in the description box, in the comment section. And then just also let me know what other types of videos that you like to hear more about, either religious OCD or any other types of OCD or just anything else. I'd love to hear from you. So please remember to do that. If you would like to schedule a free consultation with me about getting OCD, ERP for religious OCD, please go ahead and click on the link to my website in the description box. It's skillsetcounseling.com. And then we can schedule a consultation and figure out how I can best serve your needs. All right, may you have a peaceful and wonderful day. Bye-bye.